Welcome to the Cloud Services Usage class for Agility Platform. Today we're going to talk about how to use Cloud Plugin in order to create virtual machines with the CSC Gold services, how to use Cloud Plugin to create virtual machines without the CSC Gold services, and then go through and add those services at a later date, as well as actually use the Guacamole server to actually connect to those virtual machines. Best way to do this is to actually show it off. So let's log into our Agility Platform server that's got the Cloud plugin installed in it. It's cptest04.kedera.local. And remember that the thing that we're trying to do with Cloud Plugin is make as much functionality available to us via the store. So instead of having to use the designer and the project, which other people should have done already, we should be able to use this use the store to actually do what we want to do. Now, the license that I have for this particular demo has all the perspectives, so this is going to skew this somewhat, but I'll be using this to show this sum up what's going on in the background, but you'll mostly be seeing just the store and the front end. And as we can see, this has Cloud Plugin installed, and we have the Performance tab on the front page, and you can see we've got two virtual machines running, the Agility Appliance itself and the Guacamole server, which will be our connection point for all of our inbound connections. And we have the store, which has a bunch of products pre-built for us, and we'll start by choosing the CSC Gold offerings, because we want to actually start by firing up a virtual machine that's got all the CSC Gold offerings. So we'll scroll down, we'll pick the demo, and we'll check out that product. As you can see, we can actually set up prices both one time for actually instantiating the virtual machine and also recurring prices. And obviously this will change by whatever cloud you're running on, be it AWS or BizCloud. So let's order that product, and we'll create it in Agility Factory under the Oric name. And we have the opportunity to choose, or at least see what's going on here. So we can choose the size of the box, what kind of RAM and CPU it's got. We've also noticed that the antivirus backup monitoring and patching service, which this tells us we're running on AWS, are enabled. Now, because I'm cheap, I'm going to run this as a micro instance rather than a small instance. So we'll select that, then we'll go back to the ordered blueprint. We'll approve it, of course. And then we'll deploy it. And we'll create a brand new topology for this. We'll call it Oric Topology. Still in the Agility Factory. And if we check properties, you'll notice that all the services are enabled and the size of the machine is back to small rather than micro, which means that this is overridden. Whatever you're doing when you're actually checking out the blueprint, or actually ordering the blueprint, is overridden by the deployment of the blueprint. So you need to double check that, or just make sure that you're doing it at the deployment time. And of course we can approve our deployment. And as we can see, we've got a one-time cost of $45. Obviously this changes by the number of, or the whatever BizCloud that you're actually running. And then we'll start this, and you can see this actually is starting to fire up. This is a nice interface in the store. It actually immediately shows you that we're going to have a Linux box coming up. It's going to have a public and a private IP. We're going to list its host name. The instance details, it's one compute unit and 1.7 gigabytes of memory, which means that is in fact that small configuration for AWS. A micro instance would have two compute units, but 0.6 gigs of memory. And as we wait for Agility Platform to communicate with the cloud, we can see that we've grabbed our IP addresses from the starting instance, both their public and their private IPs, which is nice, and the state is still starting, so we don't have the ability to change anything yet. And while we're waiting for this to come up, we should actually see what's going on under the hood so you have an idea of what's going on from an Agility Platform standpoint. So we'll go back to the Launchpad and we'll go to the designer perspective. Now we've created this in the Agility Platform project, so let's open that up. Agility Factory project. You see we have the Guacamole server that we created earlier and this ORC topology with its template and its running VM. Now notice that's now green, which means while we've been waiting, that's actually changed from starting to running. And you see the same information from the designer perspective. You can see what memory and processor it has, public and private IPs, the host name. You also see the disk drive as well. And we can see that it's running in US East, which is an AWS instance that we have, AWS cloud that we've got. So we come back to the store-based view. So we've opened up the blueprint that we ordered from the store, and then we'll get into the topology that we started. And then we've got the ability to manage it, which would get back to that screen that we saw if you have permissions, that designer screen, actually the operations screen. We can go into charting, so you can immediately see some performance if you've got the NIMsoft pieces actually hooked up, or we can start by logging in. And that starts a connection via whatever web browser you've got to the Guacamole server, so you don't have to have your own SSH client. So immediately I'm presented with a new window. I can log in with SMAdmin and my password, and I'm presented with the SSH interface for that box. And if I can type hostname correctly, I can even see what the hostname is. And just like that, I'm there. If I'd like to transfer a file there, like say run Spotify on there, I can just drag and drop onto that window, and you can see it automatically sets up file transfer across an SCP connection. And if I issue a list now, I should be able to see that file. And of course it's there, which is very nice. Now I have the ability to very easily get into the machines that I've created in my cloud. And as a check, if everything's telling me correct, I can see that if I issue a free command, I've got 1.7 gigabytes of RAM, which is what was reported. And then we exit, we log out of that screen. So that's done. So we've created a CSC virtual machine running Linux and having all of the CSC Gold services, antivirus, monitoring, backup, and patching. Now if we go back to the sort of the under hood view, if we go to the Agility Factory view, the perspective, we can see that Guacamole server. And this is important to see. So this is actually running, again, in the same cloud, the same AWS cloud, and it's got a public IP as well. And the thing to remember about how these connections work is they'll run from wherever your browser is directly to the Guacamole server on... No, excuse me. It'll run from Agility Platform to the Guac server on 4822, and then from the Guac server, SSH directly to the endpoint server on 22 as well. So that gives you an idea what the network path looks like. Now, we talked about setting up a gold machine. Let's set up a silver machine. Let's set up one that does not necessarily have all of the gold services installed. Let's see, this particular one, it has a one-time charge of $35, and it costs you $2 for every 100 minutes. We'll call it Argent, and we'll place it in the same Agility Factory. And we can see that all these services are disabled by default. And we've actually ordered that blueprint. And now we can drill into the blueprint, approve it, and then deploy it. And I've jumped ahead here, and I've actually already done the approvement, deployment, and start. And you can see that Argent box is actually up and running to save a little time on this particular video. And if we drill into this as well, we can see it's got its own public and private IP addresses. It's running. I left it as small, so it's got 1.7 gigs of memory. And I can actually manage it or log into it or actually view charting as well. Now, what if I wanted to make changes? This is where the Power of Cloud plugin in this store interface comes up. So what if we want to change the size? Right now it's running as a small type AWS model, 1 compute unit and 1.7 gig. What if we wanted to change that to a micro instance, 2 compute units and 0.6 gig? And this particular cloud provider, AWS, doesn't support changes on the fly. So if we really wanted to do this, we would actually have to release and restart this machine. For purposes of the demo, this would work. For purposes of an actual live machine, probably not. For one that you had in production that was actually being driven by a configuration device or an auto patching or auto software device, that might not be that big of a deal. And this comes down to how your instances are actually going to run. Same thing with storage. If we want to add a 20 gig drive to VARTemp, we can. So we're going to create a new volume that's size 20 gigs, mount it at VARTemp. And with this particular cloud provider, AWS, this will not take effect until we do a release and restart. But for the demo, we will. Now, there are obviously other cloud providers might support this, depending on which one you're at. And lastly, let's take a look at services. We have the ability to change a couple things here. We could start multiple instances if we chose to, and we could actually turn on different services. So let's turn on antivirus monitoring and patching. And we can say, okay, now that is instantaneous. So that actually fires off some scripts and some package installs inside Agility Platform that actually sets this up automatically. So this does not require a reload, a release, or a restart. But to get all the configuration and other pieces running, we will. So we'll go ahead and release this now. Yes, yes, we know that all data will be lost. And while we're waiting, for AWS especially, if you wanted to actually make these changes, you probably want to do it before you deploy the machine for the first time. So if we're going to actually order this project and give it a name, then the first thing you do is you go to Properties, you'd make your changes here, and you actually turn on each service that you wanted to before you deployed it. And remember, ordering is overwritten by whatever happens at the deployment state, so make sure that you change that select RAM and CPU at deployment as well. Now it's fully released. Now we can jump back and start it. And we'll let this start. And as you can see, as this is starting up, it does have the 2 compute unit and 0.6 gigabytes of RAM that's available to a micro instance. So we do know that's going to actually work correctly. And now we see we've actually come up enough so that we can actually pull a public and a private IP. This is showing you relatively real time what this looks like against an AWS cloud. This is a lot of dead air, I understand, but it's important to know what kind of lag time you're going to see in order for this to come along. And now we should be up all the way, and we can actually go ahead and log into the machine, much the same we did before. We'll log in. We'll send our packets to the Agility platform, thence to the Guacamole server and on to our virtual machine. And you can see we've got a nice bash prompt, and if we do a df against that, you can see that last line, there's a 20 gig volume sitting on /var/temp. That's good. So that change has taken effect. And if we issue a free -k, we see that total memory available to us is more in the order of 600 megabytes or 0.6 gig rather than the 1.7 we saw earlier. So that change worked as well. And we can see it is in fact set to 2 compute units and so on. And we could check the storage as well, and that's all good as well. And these are the servers. So this is how to actually use Cloud Plugin. This actually shows you how to create a Gold Services enabled virtual machine, how to actually create a Silver Services enabled one, how to add those services, how to actually change the size and add storage, not necessarily on the fly, but how it works. Thank you. This has been the CSC Cloud Training Group. We'll have more videos available to you. Please address any questions to the Cloud Training site on C3 or training@servicemesh.com.